Avatar Meher Baba says, be happy, don't worry. I am the divine beloved who loves you more than you can ever love yourself.
Before we begin on the topic of anxiety and worrying and all of that, I thought I'd touch on a couple of ideas that were raised last time. One of them had to do with, there were images of monks in a row sitting in meditation and, basically devoting their entire lives to a secluded meditative life. And I said something about how in this age, that may not be for Baba lovers. Some for not all Baba lovers might be for that Baba himself did not really encourage that. Most of his instructions were to, live in your daily life, don't shirk your responsibilities, and be loving, and don't say anything bad about anyone. Very practical. And of course, there are many reasons for it that we have been kind of unraveling week after week, a little bit at a time. But I just wanted to say that, so Parveen, our dear Parveen mentioned that, well, isn't that a kind of the love that they are devoting all of their lives to a secluded life devoted to God, to praying and to meditating and thinking about God. And I referenced the story that I had brought up earlier about Upasni Maharaj, who said, it doesn't matter what you do. The bottom line of that story was that, as long as your intensity and longing is towards finding God, pleasing God, focusing on God, it doesn't matter what shape it takes. It is that inner yearning and that intensity of purpose that matters. And so, obviously, from that perspective, these people are certainly doing their best. However, we've been talking about winding lives and unwinding lives, and how during the winding phase, we have to collect every possible experience and its opposite. And everything has to be balanced. So we go through lifetimes when we are totally devoted to God, we seclude ourselves, we think of nothing else, we go in an ashram or in a cave or something. But the examination for if we accomplish the purpose of it is not, or not, is in the daily life. When we come back in the clutter and disharmony of regular life and try to live that life of prayer in this hustle, bustle, negativity, opposition, jarring physical life, that is the most difficult kind of living a spiritual life, which is what Baba has been a proponent of and has mostly spoken about this in his discourses on meditation. He has detailed all the different kinds of meditations, but in his discussions and exchanges with people, he has, except for rare occasions, has not encouraged people to do that. And there have been people like Kekobot, who Baba, asked to repeat God's name 100,000 times a day. And that was for Baba's work. So it wasn't for Kekobot's necessarily. It was all of what is asked his lovers to do ultimately is to help him in his work. So I just wanted to clarify that the test of those lives of prayer is when we come into this life of hustle, bustle, clatter, disharmony, and try to live it. So, and just as we've talked about how any experience that we gather during the winding phase of life has to resurface, has to come back up and be purified and cleansed, that these experiences are coded and kind of like colorations on these sanskaric fibers that interpenetrate the physical body and beyond. And that once the winding phase is over and unwinding begins, the first part of that unwinding life is usually winding what we need to know and learn about life, that particular life that we have not learned before. But then it comes at times when unwinding begins. And during this period of unwinding, all kinds of experiences from the past, impressions from the past, resurface. And it is this resurfacing that we are going to talk about in terms of anxiety and worry. Because worry and anxiety is very different during winding and during unwinding. During winding phase, you can do something about anxiety because you are focused very narrowly on specific themes that you have to learn. There's a boundary around it. And so you're bounded by it. And during winding phase, as we talked about it, and Baba talked about it, it's a lives of balance. You do this or believe in this, and then you come back and you live the opposite of it and believe the opposite of it. But each time, each of these opposites is bounded. So during unwinding phases, something very peculiar happens. And it's no longer about balancing anything. Everything has been balanced. It is about uniting the opposites together, purifying them, and releasing them. So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit. But before we start that, let me just have another footnote about karma and karmic ties. As we said, the law of karma is a law that says how these opposites should work and pushes people towards directions to bring about that balance that we just talked about. But as we do this, we do it with other people, with other circumstances, with other things. And we create what is referred to as karmic ties. So karmic ties are really sanskaras, are coded in sanskaras, but they're caused by this law of karma. So we have these connections with the entirety of life, with our families, with our nation, with the earth, with everything that we come in contact with through this law of karma. And we have these karmic ties. And because these experiences caused by the law of karma are sanskaras that are put on these sanskaric fibers. These sanskaric fibers connect. And when we talk about karmic ties, we are really talking about these sanskaric fibers and how they are literally connected with other people and other things and other places outside of us. And those who can see these things, it's very clear to them that it's not an idea, it's not a metaphor, it's not a philosophical thing. It's actually physical matter, physical strings, and they go this way and that way, another way, and tie people together. And so when we try to unwind, we have to unwind it with those people and circumstances where they were originally created. And so the ultimate test, as I said, is in the world, because it is true that one can spend many lifetimes in seclusion and building up one's spiritual bodies and the spiritual energies, which is very, very helpful. But then ultimately, one has to deal with the sanskaras. One has to come to the life and deal with these sanskaric connections that we have with other people, and to start to release them and free them. So winding and unwinding, turns out, are very different. On the surface, you can't tell if a person is winding or unwinding, but internally, it is very, very clear to those who can see. In fact, the direction of energy flow is different during winding, which is clockwise. And Baba has shown the winding phase in his charts in God Speaks, if you notice, are kind of a clockwise direction that they're winding. And then when you see the diagrams where they show unwinding beginning, these begin to go the other way, from left to right, because that is the direction of energy within that particular person that's unwinding. And this can be very jarring to people who are not in the unwinding phase yet, and they're completing the very important phase of winding. And so it can be jarring to them, and they may dislike you, and they may kind of create circumstances that oppose you and so forth. And it's not their fault, it's just because the energies are going different ways, and that's the natural reaction. So during unwinding, we lift. We don't balance. That's one of the key differences. And I just wanted to underline that during unwinding, we have to lift. And to the extent that we can lift our own sanskaras, we talked about how when sanskaras are released, the sanskaric fibers are now free to go and connect to higher levels of divinity and circulate down much higher, more refined divine force into the atmosphere. But to the extent that we lift through these fibers that are connected with others, we tug on the ones that we have connections with. And again, we strain them. So it is not unusual to find that unwinding people, unwinding people, winding people who really dislike them. But during unwinding, we have to learn to go beyond that. I mean, with the understanding of what is going on with these people, we can't blame them. We can't hate them. We can't, because we know what's going on with them. And so by that understanding, we lift them as well as ourselves. So what is anxiety? During the unwinding phase, before the sanskaras can get kind of loosened enough to unwind, a period of kind of loosening happens, where the energy of the old sanskaras that are getting ready to be released begins to build up. And this energy is very amorphous because it's not directed to a particular goal or a theme the way it is during winding phase. Now it pulls on many, many different lives and many, many different themes. And then they're being kind of loosened. And as they're loosened, they release energy or the fire. They build a fire. They build a fire. And it is this fire that is, and this amorphous pool of energy that keeps building and building, that is sensed as anxiety. And so these feelings, because they're so complex and because they haven't quite kind of taken form and entered in awareness in the way that they were originally created, they're nebulous. You can't identify them. You can't organize them. You can't put your finger on them. You just know that there is this fire, this pressure that is building inside, and you can't do anything about it. And in other words, you try this and that and the other thing to deal with it. And eventually one gets good at dealing with anxiety. One can't cure it. One can't get rid of it. And you don't want to get rid of it. You don't want to suppress it in any negative way, because it is the helpful energy that is going to burn the sanskaras off of these fibers. So the first energy is released to burn them off, the fibers. And that is what is then as anxiety. So again, it is amorphous, it is raw, it's a pressing, moving energy that cannot be organized, identified, or understood. And as it builds up, the sense that one has is that, oh boy, something is threatening me, something is happening inside of me, and it's building up. And when this dam breaks, boy, it's going to destroy a lot of stuff. It's going to destroy me. It's going to change me. And actually, it is going to change and help the person grow beyond their limitations of that time. So it's a good thing, but the way we are used to recognizing it is as anxiety, and because we have wound so many lifetimes, we want to deal with it in a way that we dealt with it during winding, to suppress it, to negativize it. But if we deal with it, kind of put up with the pressure, don't give it negative, and try to put it to positive use, it lifts sanskaras in a remarkable way. So one cannot solve that anxiety during unwinding. During winding phase, anxiety is also apparent for different reasons, but that can be contained because the context of it is limited. But during unwinding, one just has to learn to live with it, and it becomes easier to live with it if one recognizes that this is a natural process. This is what is expected. This is what you signed up for when you decided to become a spiritual seeker. Not that any of us decided that. It's just part of growth, natural growth. And so it's this pressure and fire that cooks the sanskaras and loosens them, and then finally helps release them and bring about growth and change. And as difficult as this phase of unwinding is, it has phases of sublime beauty when one is filled with awe, gratitude, satisfaction, and exaltation, and a sense of nearness to God. And as one goes through these phases of what feels like a death, and one kind of re-establishes oneself, one is opened up to more intimate and remarkable sense of beauty of God. So the next topic is worrying, but is there anything we want to talk about now, or should I jump into worrying?
If anybody would like to say something or have a question, please raise your hands or open your mics.
Say, Baba, I have a question. You said that to put it in a positive use, how should we put the anxiety positive? What does it mean?
Good question. That's what we're going to talk about when we talk about worry.
Oh, okay.
So I'll respond to that.
Okay.
Yeah, this might take a while to settle in with people. Yeah, but let's see. Mernush has a question.
Yes. Mernush Jai Baba.
To my opinion, the best thing to deal with anxiety is repeating Meher Baba's name wholeheartedly. And that he basically free you from anxiety and fear and worry. So because his name has the power that carries his divinity and his love and his compassion. So this is what I've been doing with my own anxiety and worries, and every single time it works. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mernush John. That's also, on a practical level, is really the bottom line. I know that for me that works, and especially if I sing Baba's name, or I listen to Baba's name being sung, or if I just gaze at his images, one after the other, just looking at his image, if it is possible for one to just take a 15-minute out of one's day and just sit there and gaze at the beauty of Baba and at his, it is so impossible to describe his glory beyond any superlative. And as one looks at his image, one gets that sense of intimacy and of his glory and of his love. So repeating the name and looking at his images, I have found helpful, just as Mernush has.
Jai Baba. Ramin has his hand up. Ramin Jan, Jai Baba.
And one question that comes to my mind is, by by shifting our attention toward the name of Baba's name or song or something that divert our attention toward Baba in any way, does that change the reality of that moment, that what we are experiencing? Let's say, just to make it clear, let's say I have some pain. Let's say I have physical pain, and doctor says, okay, you need 3 days, or you're going through this difficulties and pain and fever and so on. I change my attention through that time towards, but does that really سرماخوردگی من, does that my coldness, well, that reality change that I'm experiencing at that moment, maybe for a period of time, but again, I have to deal with it. I'm just wondering, by shifting our attention to Baba or deviating our attention towards Baba, that the reality of that experience will change or not? I would just maybe just for open
Very good question.
conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, very good question. I think, you know, we are like a what do you call these big pieces of ice that are floating in the ocean. Only 1/8 of it is on the top, and most of it is under the water. These glaciers that kind of fall off, but in our case, maybe 1,000,000-fold of us is underneath that, beneath awareness, and only a tiny little sliver is in our awareness. So it may not register in our awareness when you're saying Baba's name. Well, it sometimes doesn't, sometimes it does. At least in my case, it doesn't always register in my awareness at that instant or during that time. But what it does is that it helps that pool of undifferentiated energy that we talked about, that is the cause of anxiety, to get organized in helpful ways. You see, just as Meher said, Baba's name is not just like another sound. It is the divine name. It is a divine sound. And any name of God, as Baba has said, has that power. But in this age, Baba's name has the most power and will align us most with what is in Baba's plans. So much of what goes on when we repeat Baba's name may be happening underneath. And because of all these ties that we have with everyone that we were just talking about, it helps everyone. It is not focused on just a single person. We always think that I want to get to God, I want to, get God realized and all of that. But God's interests are personal, but also for everybody. And so, and creation is struck in such a way that you can't help yourself spiritually without helping others. And so anyhow, what a wonderful question you have. Let's talk a little bit about worrying. Worrying is when we try to put that anxiety into a structure, into a framework, and assign it to something that we are afraid of. Worrying is usually about some fear that we have, and that undifferentiated energy that we have, we try to organize it into some negative way, and we say it is this. It is about this fear. And so we begin to worry about it. So that is why Baba is so adamant. That's why his "don't worry, be happy" is so key. That is the kind of the secret key, don't worry. Another thing that happens when you repeat Baba's name is that you surrender. Or if you do it with a sense of surrender, Parihanu, that is how you give all of that pepped up energy to where it belongs. And repeating Baba's name, looking at his image, is something that helps that process of surrender. But if one is aware of it, one is consciously, I'm talking about my own self, when I am aware of just giving it to Baba, because he's repeatedly said, give it to me, give all of it to me, because it's mine. You don't own any of it. So if I can remember to give it to him, to surrender to him, that is another way to kind of deal with that anxiety. And another way is action. That is why Baba says, do your best, don't worry, be happy. Because if you sit in the corner and do nothing, you just fret. But as we talked about, all of our sanskaras have been made through action with others. So if we act based on our highest understanding of divinity, of what is good, of Baba, of love, that is another help. So do your best, don't worry, and give everything, surrender everything to God. So anxiety is necessary because it's the energy that provides the fuel, the fire to burn sanskaras. But to use that energy properly, we have to not negativize it. We have to not put it into worry. And then what happens is that the energy goes into changing us. And as we change, even our brain changes. But before our brain changes, our thinking changes, our relationship with God changes. We have to live it. We have to do it in action. The sanskaras are in the feet, in the legs, in the thighs, in the groin. These are the sanskaras of action that have to be released first before they can be lifted. And so that is why it is so important when Baba says, do your best, then don't worry, be happy. It is part of the same thing. Let's see, I have more to say, but I think I want to stop here because if there are any additional questions, we can, or comments, we can deal with it. And if not, then it might be time to go to the rest of the.
I have actually question or comment, you should say, about surrendering. I want to say that from where it comes from, it requires Baba's grace to be able to fully not to worry and surrender it all. I feel like, thoughts come and they do stick to you. Even though you remember Baba, you could say his name and say, I surrender. But I feel until his grace descends, it's not fully executed.
I think the minute you say, Baba, I surrender, no matter how you feel or what you feel, you have surrendered. Because part of your surrender is to allow these negative feelings to come to the surface, these pressures that are building up to come up. What we're talking about is not that the minute you say, I surrender, that pressure goes away. That pressure is needed. Those sanskaras have to be cleansed, have to be purified, and that energy, that fire is needed to cleanse them. So when you say, I surrender, you have to accept the fact that you have already surrendered. And if you're feeling still, the pressure, it's because Baba wants you to feel that pressure. It's because it is part of his process, part of his, you've already given it to him. So let him do his thing. He wants you to feel anxious. Let him be anxious, but don't worry about it. And then I know worrying, I used to think that worry is like an organ. It's like my liver. It is so connected with me. I can't just cut out my liver and throw it out. The same way I can't cut out worry out of me and throw it out. But just thinking about the fact that we are surrendering, even if we don't feel it, even if it doesn't register with us, it is the first step in gradually beginning to feel it. And if you're lucky, we will go through a period that we feel released from it, but then we go through another period when more deeply colored sanskaras will come to the surface to provide the energy for a further boost. You see, worrying says that I know what is right, I know what the results should be, and it keeps you from growing. And to the extent that we can remember, even if we can't feel it, just say the words, that it is just trying to, whatever way we can, keep it in somewhere in our awareness, that it is Baba who is providing this energy, and we should not be attached to the results. We do our best, and then we don't worry. We leave the results to Baba because that he knows best. He is going to bring about what is in best interest for everyone. And so it's gradually, we get better at handling it. And, we have to try every possible tool in our toolbox, as someone used to say, to finally get good at it. But eventually we will get good at it. And it will come, and we will feel it, and we will be able to better handle it.
Yeah, Jill has her hand up. Jill, Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. So Farhad, don't mean to put you on the spot, but it's really hard for me to understand the kind of abstract view. Could you give an example of changing anxiety to worry, and use an example of something that happens in life?
Well, it is not a formulary thing here, Jill. That's a question and struggle that we are all facing. That when we are entering the dimension of unwinding, it is not formulary, like we can describe it, or we can kind of give a pill for it, just the way Ramin was talking about it, that you give this and then that happens. Or if it is this circumstance, you do this and this will come out of it. It's not like this. It can't be like that. It is more complex. It is more, it forces us to reach within areas of us that we are unfamiliar with. We cannot use existing tools during unwinding to deal with it, but we try. And so I can't give you an example because it doesn't lend itself to an example. If I give you an example, then it is something that we do during the winding phase. During unwinding phase, each of us will have to find that way with the help of Baba. And that is why Baba's help becomes indispensable, because we discover that we are hopeless. Nobody can give us an example. Nobody can tell us how to do it. So we surrender. We say, okay, you do it. I know I can't do it. And that state of helplessness and hopelessness is where he wants us. And he has given us all these assurances that I know all of this, I know how difficult it is, and I still want you to do it. Just like when he said, I want you to understand I'm going to explain what cannot be explained. I want you to understand what cannot be explained. So I wish I could be of more help, but I think the simplest practical things that we have talked about, like there are examples out there of people who have been, for example, severely struggling with addiction, and they have not been able to stop it on their own. And every time they went to use, they said, Baba, I give it to you. Baba, I give it to you. And then eventually it came a time when they stopped. The addiction went away. So it is that trying, that earnest wanting, that is the only thing that helps. And there are many examples of it. And Marinush talked about her own experience as well. In her case, she's lucky because she can experience it in her awareness. But many of us don't immediately experience it in our awareness.
Yeah, Ramin has his hand up. Jai Baba Ramin.
You're on mute.
Oh yeah, and Jay Baba. There were two things. One of them was when Mehnaz mentioned about the surrender. Dr. Shafa, when I think of surrender, that word, give me a horse that has been trained and mounted, and then goes. Somebody sit on it and says that, okay, go there and stay there and stay there. You go do your work and come back. You surrender to your order. One metaphor is that. For me, it's like surrender. Sometimes doesn't have really positive process in my mind somehow. Somehow I get confused to be surrender, or what does that mean, surrender? But the thing is, I got a chance to spend some time with this concept, and I realized that acceptance is actually similar to same thing as surrender, because let's say when I accept something, some difficulty come to my life, and it is unfair, and I have some difficulty to accept it. And after a while, I realize the issue is so bigger than what I think, and I have to accept it. And when I accept it, I come to this wider space that is like, I don't fight it anymore. I realize it's something is out of my hand. I don't fight it anymore. I accept it. I don't say I accept this, I don't accept that. I accept life as I accept death. I accept light as I accept darkness. Acceptance is, I think, is the same, another way of saying surrender, but in much more capacity to accept a wide experience of life. That is something like when something happens, it doesn't shake you, or even if it shake you, it doesn't last for whole life or half a life or a couple of years. Maybe 1 day, 2 days, or 3 days, Baba will pick it up, and you don't even know that Baba picked it up. You think, oh, it was just something, illusion. But anyway, I just wanted to share this. And the second one was when our friend was talking about. She was talking about one practical thing that what was it, Dr. Shaffer? Well, she was asking for one practical.
Right, that this theory is fine and good, but what does it mean in real life? Can I give an example of how all of this is done, not worrying?
Oh, So, it's basically his perspective. Baba gave us the avatar perspective to things, basically. But human perspective is so much influenced with five senses. That's why we experience we feel anxious and worriness. But the thing is, these are indication that this is the time that we have to tune into the Baba vibration again. So it's a very good reminder. Oh, this thing happened again into me, worriness, I'm anxious. But this is good indication to remind us that it's a good time at that moment to tune into Baba vibration, thought, love, which is always available. It's just our mind was carried away with event and how it's going to be, an expectation, how it's going to work out. But really, Baba is right there. Just tune into it. So I think a good example of that, I realize when I go to work, I have some worriness in my mind. First, I do this, then I do that. I have to say this to that. I have to say that. I don't know that what would be responsible to that. And these are all thought, component with emotional things to it, because we're dealing with human and five senses. So we go to work. From my place home to work is, let's say, is about 5 minutes walk. At that moment, I could plan. When I get there, I do this, I do that. I have to say this, I have to do that. Or I just realized that Baba working with me. And Baba, thank you for giving me legs so I could walk and go and serve this thing. Baba, thank you for this air that I can breathe, fresh air. In Africa, they have hot weather. In Iran, south of Iran, they smoke this, dirty air. And thank you, Baba, for having safe home. Thank you. Rain is outside, so I have shelter to be in. And when you appreciate the simple thing in yourself and remind yourself, because life is not one thing really, it's just everything. You just remind yourself to other aspects of life at that moment. So that thing, it doesn't dominate you as a worriness. So I just realized you bring yourself to the moment of Baba love, grateful for, ability to, you can see, ability you can walk, ability you can share love and serve, ability to receive love. And I think this kind of thought is somehow inviting Baba vibration to your field, and that change your negativity, worriness, these things, to kind of not there anymore. That was one way of dealing with this. That will come to my mind. Sorry about that.
Very good. Yeah, I think the problem we all have is that we are not always in that expansive mood, and we cannot always remember to think in that way. But then we do have moments when we feel that sense of gratitude and intimacy with God. So absolutely right. And just as you said, acceptance is another word for surrender. And so surrender does not resonate with you, that's no big deal, fine. It may have to do with the fact that Islam means taslim, and some of us have negative associations with Islam and taslim, which means surrender. Could be that it's related to that, and that it doesn't resonate with you, but acceptance does. Another word for the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, there is another question. It says, how do we differentiate between worry and anxiety?
Well, anxiety is undifferentiated energy that we can't say what it is. The minute we associate it with a fear, with something, it becomes an obsession, it becomes a worry. So we worry about something, and that something is what puts that anxiety into a framework, into a shape, into a structure, and doesn't allow it to be freely flowing to do its proper job.
Thank you. Jai Baba. Jai Baba, everyone.
Yeah,